The July heat in Arizona is the kind that sears the mind. The sky is a pale blue, the desert soil cracked, the air heavy and sticky. But that day, the heat rising between the scrapyard's rusty iron wasn't just heat. It was like a scream no one heard. When the trunk opened, the first sound was the sharp, whining scrape of metal against metal. Then silence. Then that uniform, folded, cleaned, preserved for years, carrying the weight of a name, R. Hartwell. There are some stories, like the one Truman Capote told in Kansas, that tear through the quiet curtain of everyday life, letting a darker world seep through. There are some disappearances, like the evil that haunts Stephen King's small towns, that linger for years in people's minds, their sleep, the gaze in their mirrors. And some secrets tremble on the lips of names too afraid to face the camera, like in the best Netflix documentaries, and remain unspoken. Because if you talk, you die. Because when the truth comes out, everything falls apart. His disappearance began under an open sky, at the edge of a long road, with no goodbye to anyone. And over the years it grew silently, branched and tangled into lives, courtrooms, police files, nightmares. Now, from a rusty corner of a scrapyard, from bones waiting in a mine, from tapes, envelopes, bank receipts, phone calls, men shaking hands on golf courses, from a battered notebook, the story rises. Like Zodiac's cold, unsolved shadow, there are still eyes watching anyone who dares to learn what happened that night. We'll tell you who survived, who was buried, who spoke, and who was silenced. But first, we'll look at the uniform in the trunk, because everything begins there, and maybe it never ends. Arizona's summer feels like it was designed to scorch people's patience. By mid-July, it's as if an invisible oven door has shut over Phoenix. The sky is transparent, blistering, and dead. Heat shimmers above the asphalt road. Metal gleams between the junked cars under the desert sun, too hot to touch bare-handed. When Miguel Ortega arrived at Santos Salvage at 7:30 that morning, his t-shirt was already clinging to his back. Working a scrapyard took guts, but Miguel had walked the same path every day for 12 years. He watched his footing carefully so he wouldn't slip on rusty bolts, crushed cans, or shards of shattered glass beneath him. That day was just another ordinary day, until he marked that car. At the edge of the yard sat a faded brown 1979 Buick, waiting there for 3 months. Its rear window was cracked, front bumper dented, an old insurance sticker on the hood. The vehicle had come from an insurance auction, picked up at a lot in Tucson. The paperwork said flood damage, but Miguel hadn't seen any water stains or rust when he looked. That morning, the Buick was crossed off his work list. Sent to Crusher today, his boss had scrawled in handwriting across it. Miguel got to work, smashing the windows, stripping the seats, removing the tires, all routine. Last, he'd popped the trunk to salvage whatever was inside, an old jacket or a spare tire. But the trunk wouldn't open. The lock was so rusted and seized that even with a key it wouldn't turn. Miguel grabbed a crowbar, sweat running down his neck. He planted both feet on the bumper, drove the bar into the lock and leaned in with his full weight. A sound came, like a groan. As the metal yielded, it was as if something, a secret, hidden and forgotten for years, was crying out. When the trunk lid creaked open, at first he didn't understand what he was seeing. No spare tire, no jack. Instead, inside lay an Arizona State Police uniform, carefully folded, impeccably pressed, nearly pristine, and stitched above the breast. R. Hartwell. Miguel's stomach knotted. He'd heard that name before, because it belonged to one of the strangest, most tragic cases in Phoenix's past. Officer Rebecca Hartwell vanished in 1985. Her patrol car was found idling on the shoulder of the highway, door ajar, radio hissing. But she was gone. never found. The case was closed within 6 months. The papers moved on to newer stories and Rebecca's name slowly faded from memory. But now, her uniform had surfaced, in this junkyard, inside this trunk. With trembling fingers, Miguel pulled his phone from his pocket and called his boss, Tony Medina. "Tony, you better come down here. There's something you need to see." A gruff voice on the other end. "Miguel, I'm buried in inventory. What'd you find?" It's a uniform. Police. Says Hartwell on it." Silence. Then Tony's tone changed. "Don't touch it. Not a thing. I'm on my way." Within 10 minutes, Tony arrived, wearing crumpled shirt and sandals. The moment he looked into the trunk, the colour drained from his face. "God, we're calling the cops, now." Half an hour later, Detective Eileen Chen from Phoenix PD arrived with 2 uniformed officers. Eileen Chen was 45, her face all sharp lines, clad in a purely functional grey suit, the kind of woman who didn't smile without reason. And she too remembered the name. The Hartwell case had broken during her rookie years, when she was still on patrol. People whispered then, "Young woman must have killed herself." But Chen had never believed it. She took the crowbar from Miguel, leaned into the trunk, and examined the uniform carefully. The patch, the epaulets, the stitching, all still crisp. And beneath the name tag was the badge number, 4471. That was Rebecca Hartwell's number. Chen, her face unreadable, slipped the uniform into an evidence bag. Then she turned to Tony. "Where'd this car come from?" Tony went into the office to check the files. "Insurance auction. Came up from Tucson 3 months ago. Said flood damage, but sure doesn't look like it." Chen frowned. She studied the trunk lining closely. It had been cut. Someone had opened it up, then screwed it back into place. From the dust patterns under the screws, it was clear something else had been hidden there once. Something that had since been removed. Chen turned to the uniformed officers, processed the whole car. Every paper, every bolt, every scratch. This is now a crime scene. That night, the story of the uniform broke on the local news. In Phoenix's air, the old tale that had waited silently for years came alive again. And in Tempe, a math teacher named Daniel Hartwell, Rebecca's brother, watched from his apartment. He'd been 23 when she disappeared. Now 38, he still couldn't believe it. His hands shook as he reached for the phone and dialed a number he'd never deleted. Detective Chen's desk line. "Detective Chen, this is Daniel Hartwell. I saw the news." "That uniform, was it my sister's?" Chen took a deep breath. "Yes, Mr. Hartwell. I know this is difficult. Can you come in tomorrow? The case is officially being reopened." Daniel's voice cracked. "I've been waiting 15 years for this. I always knew someone killed her." The next morning, Daniel arrived at the precinct. Chen had already piled 3 boxes of old case files on her desk. Notes, photos, reports from the previous lead detective. But nothing about it sat right with her. Too much was missing. "Mr. Hartwell," she said softly, "what do you think happened to your sister?" Daniel opened a folder he'd brought along. "She told me a name once. Vincent Cormack. He was a federal prosecutor at the time. Said she'd been gathering evidence on him. Corruption." Chen wrote the name down. "Did she tell her superiors?" "No. She didn't trust anyone until she had more proof." Chen's gaze darkened. There was no mention of this in the old files. It was as if someone had scrubbed them clean. She glanced again at the photos of Rebecca's patrol car, parked on the shoulder, engine running, door ajar, radio crackling, but no Rebecca, no gun, no blood. And now this 1979 Buick showing up from Tucson, with her pressed uniform and a cut trunk lining, was tearing through the silence after 15 years. Chen looked into the young man's eyes. "Mr. Hartwell, you know this wasn't an accident or suicide, don't you?" Daniel's gaze burned. "My sister was murdered. And I'm going to find out who did it. Chen nodded slightly. Now we'll find out. Together. That night, Chen sat at her desk, holding a cassette in her hands. An old, faded label written in pen. VC meeting 07-15-85. It felt like the tape still breathed warm air, and for the first time in years, Chen felt she was starting in the right place. Aileen Chen paused for a moment before sliding the cassette into the old tape deck. The walls of the precinct room were thick, but even the air inside felt changed, charged, cramped, as though a cold draft was seeping through the shadows. The handwriting scrawled across the cassette was shaky, almost desperate. VC meeting 07-15-85. That date was the night Rebecca Hartwell disappeared. Chen held her breath and pressed play. First came a click, then a low hum from the machine. Through the static, a few words emerged. Is this place secure? As much as it ever is. Then a man's voice, hard, certain. You've got all the documents? And another man, younger, his tone nervous. Yes, but this isn't worth the money. Is everything just staying here? A chair scraped, papers rustled, a breath. Then the first voice again, sharper. You'll stop talking now. Leave the files, take the money, and don't show your face again. If you ask one more question, I'll bury you. Finally, a much softer voice. Remember, you never heard this tape. Then it cut out. A few more seconds of muffled static, then silence. Chen rewound it and listened again. She etched every word, every breath into her mind. The cold radiating from the tape filled the corners of the room. And that name, VC Vincent Cormack. In 1985, he was the district attorney. Now he was a partner at one of the state's most prestigious law firms, part of Phoenix's elite. And clearly, his past was not as clean as it looked. Chen stacked the files on her desk and reread Rebecca's shift notes. On July 15th, they read, 2046, suspicious black sedan at north exit of I-17. 2103, made contact with Tucson-plated Buick. 2105, initiated roadside conversation. 21 some radio signal lost. After that, no record. Her patrol car was found with the radio still live. Her gun was missing. And now, that same Buick, left at a scrapyard 3 months ago, had reappeared, with her pressed uniform in its trunk. The next day, Chen met with Daniel Hartwell. He sat with dark circles under his eyes. Sleepless, clutching an old planner that had belonged to his sister. He placed it on the table. I found this in her room, he said. I never gave it to the detectives because, at the time it felt far-fetched, but now... Chen opened the planner. Near the back pages, wedged between sheets, was a business card. Vincent Cormack, Maricopa County District Attorney. On the back, in Rebecca's handwriting, I'll tell everything I know, sooner or later. Chen slipped the card into her pocket and looked at Daniel. I'll be honest with you, she said. Cormack won't be easy to touch. This city has built shields around him, but the tape and the uniform, they're a strong start. Daniel's voice hardened. Then you stop him, or I will. Chen inclined her head slightly. We'll stop him. Together. That afternoon, Chen didn't go straight to Cormack's office. Instead, she tracked down the man who signed off on the Buick's insurance auction in Tucson, a clerk sweating in a dusty archive room, his glasses sliding down his nose. Mark DeWitt. Show me this car's file, Chen demanded. Mark hesitated, but Chen's stare left him no room to squirm. Here, he finally muttered. An old folder, almost empty inside. Just a report. Flood damage, found in Tucson suburbs. Auctioned 3 months ago. Chen flipped the page over, but on the back, faintly scribbled in pencil, was a note. Submitted by R. Hartwell. Chen's hands froze. Impossible. Rebecca Hartwell was listed as the person who delivered the car for auction, but she vanished that same night. She turned to Mark. Whose handwriting is this? The blood drained from his face. I don't know. I just box up the papers. Chen slammed the file against the table. Don't lie to me, DeWitt. If you can't explain this, you're standing in a crime scene right now. Mark clutched his head. They told me to write it that way. Said the name didn't matter. Just write it. So I... Chen narrowed her eyes, then pulled a copy of the tape from her pocket and set it on the table. The label. VC. Meeting. Mark's eyes widened. Where did you get that? Chen's reply was cold and brief. Now it's your turn to answer. That night, as she listened to the tape again in her car, Chen noticed something between the words. A metallic scraping. Then a train whistle. And faintly, a dog barking. Train. Dog. As though the meeting had happened near tracks. Maybe in a warehouse. Chen spread out maps of Tucson. In 1985, the only rail line in that area ran through the south end, along San Pablo Road. There, now abandoned, stood a warehouse once used to store repossessed vehicles. She pocketed the information and drove to Tucson at dawn. The warehouse was dark, dusty, and rusting. Its door was locked, but she forced it open with her crowbar. Inside, the hum of trains still echoed faintly from the tracks, and in the distance, dogs barked. The floor was coated in dust, but in the corners were stains, old and rusty, like blood. Chen moved slowly. At the back wall, she found a rusted metal cabinet. Its lock had been broken. Inside were stacks of files, taped envelopes, photographs, and at the top, a black and white photo of Rebecca Hartwell, in uniform, stern gaze. But across the photo, in red ink, someone had scrawled, "Silence isn't free." Chen carefully gathered the files. Among the papers, another name surfaced. Henry Slade. Cormac's aide back then, now disappeared. And another note. Slade saw everything. Silence him. As Chen shut the cabinet, she heard a sound. It didn't come from where she'd entered, from deeper inside. The shuffle of feet. Her hand went to her gun. Who's there? Silence, then a whisper. Being here is a mistake. Chen spun around, but no one was there. The door in the corner groaned shut. On her way out, Chen called Daniel. Do you know Slade? Daniel's voice was tired but alert. My sister mentioned him. He was her ally, or so she thought. But then, he vanished. Chen took a deep breath. We have to find him. If he's alive, he knows. That night, driving home, Chen noticed headlights following her far too long. Whenever she sped up, they sped up. Then, just for a moment, they disappeared. Relieved, she parked outside her house, only to find an envelope stuffed into her mailbox. No name, no markings. Inside was a single sentence. Don't dig under the tracks, or you'll end up beneath them. And a scrap of fabric fell out, a piece cut from Rebecca Hartwell's uniform. Chen spent the night awake, the walls around her lined with old photos. Rebecca smiling, her patrol car, the uniform unearthed in the scrapyard. But what echoed most was that voice. Being here is a mistake. Toward dawn, Chen looked in the mirror, and she made herself a promise. If it's a mistake, then it will be mine to the end. By morning, Aileen Chen had thrown a fresh stack of files and her Glock into her bag. The sky was grey, a thin fog curling over Tucson's outskirts. The threat note left on her kitchen table the night before was still there. Don't dig under the tracks, or you'll end up beneath them. Chen read it once more, then crumpled it and shoved it into her pocket. If someone was going under, she would decide who. Her first stop was the Maricopa Courthouse archives. Henry Slade's trail might still be warm, but after 1986, his name never appeared again. The last record was dated September 10th, 1985. Resignation, citing health reasons. Chen glanced at the corner of the report, signed, as she expected, Vincent Cormack, and beneath it, in his own hand. This individual will be remembered with gratitude for his service. But why did a man remembered with gratitude never surface again? As she left the archives, an older clerk with long grey hair approached her timidly. "You're asking about Slade?" she whispered. Chen straightened. "You knew him?" The woman glanced around nervously. Then she pulled a key from her pocket. "I found this in his office, the day he left. I never told anyone." A number was etched into the key. R47. Chen narrowed her eyes. "What is it?" The woman shook her head. "I just clean. But he used to have a locker at the train depot." Under the tracks, again. Chen thanked her and left. The San Pablo train depot on Tucson's south side looked even more deserted at this hour. The fog still clung to the rails. Chen walked among the old lockers, reading the numbers. 43, 44, 45. It was locked, but the key fit. When she opened it, a messy stack of files tumbled out. On top, scrawled in faded ink, RH, 07-15-85. Chen spread the papers on the ground. Yellowed sheets, a photograph, a few audio tapes, and a letter. The heading of the letter made her skin crawl. "By the time you read this, I'll already be gone." It was in Slade's own handwriting. Chen began to read carefully. "If you found this, and you're still chasing this story, here's all I can tell you. Rebecca Hartwell asked the wrong people the wrong questions. Everyone who silenced her, their names are in this file. I couldn't run. You won't either. Vincent Cormack always told me I had two choices. Stay silent and live, or speak and vanish. I stayed silent. And still, I vanished." Chen rifled through the rest of the documents. One of them was an old photograph. 3 men standing by the tracks. The middle face was unmistakable. Vincent Cormack. The 2 others had names scrawled beneath them. Slade and M. Rivers. At the bottom of Slade's letter, one last line. "If you want to find me, start under the tracks." Chen tucked the photo into her pocket. Under the tracks. Maybe it wasn't just a metaphor. She walked a few meters past the rails. The ground was soft, sunken in places. She found a shovel and began to dig. Each strike of the blade split the silence, until finally, a metallic clang. Chen dropped the shovel and scraped the dirt away with her hands. From beneath a rusted iron plate, she unearthed a corroded chest. It was locked, but the chain broke easily. Inside were bones that had waited for years, and draped over them, the remains of a uniform, the chest badge still legible. R. Hartwell. Chen drew back, breathing hard. Rebecca was found, but not alive. Beside the chest lay a card. On it, only one line. "If one of us speaks, we all die. VC." That night, when Chen called to tell Daniel what she'd found, the other end of the line was quiet. Then came a faint click and a familiar whisper. "They'll find me too." "Daniel," Chen said, panic rising, but the line went dead. The next morning she drove to Daniel's house. The door was ajar, the place in disarray. On the table, another note. "You've seen what happens to those who don't stay quiet." And beneath it, another scrap of uniform. Chen stood in a corner, thinking. Cormack's people were still at work. As Slade said, there was no escaping. She would either speak or disappear. In that moment, she chose. She would see it through to the end. Chen returned to the depot locker. Among the files, she found another tape. On the label, Final Meeting. She slid it into her tape deck and pressed play. First, the sound of a deep breath. Then Cormac's voice. At the end of this, you'll either be a hero or a corpse. Your choice. Then Rebecca's voice, low but resolute. You won't silence me. No matter how long it takes, someone will learn the truth. Then, a slap. A metal door slamming. Toward the end of the tape, Cormac's whisper came again. The tracks are always open. And the tape fell silent. Chen pulled it out and slipped it into her pocket. She had names now, evidence, a body, but one question still burned. Was Henry Slade still alive? And if he was, why hadn't he spoken? She followed the last lead she had left, the third man in the photograph. M. Rivers. From old courthouse personnel records, she learned his full name, Matthew Rivers. He'd also left in 1986, disappeared from Arizona, last seen at a motel near the Nevada border. After that, nothing. Chen packed her bag and hit the road. Soon, she was parked outside that motel. It was run down, its sign half fallen, windows dusty. The old man at the front desk looked absent-minded, a cigarette hanging from his lips. Chen asked about Matthew Rivers. The man exhaled smoke and nodded toward the third door. He was here last night, didn't come out all night. Chen walked to the door and knocked. Matthew Rivers? Aileen Chen. We need to talk. A lock turned behind the door, then a thin voice. Too late. The door opened a crack. The room was dark, curtains drawn. In the corner sat an aging, exhausted man, holding an old envelope in his hands, his eyes swollen, his face lined and scarred. I knew you'd come, he said. Chen pulled up a chair and sat. Tell me everything, now. Rivers, his hands trembling, held the envelope out to her. Everything you need is in here. But once you open it, you can't go back. If you read it, you're in this for good. Chen took the envelope, their eyes meeting. Rivers whispered one last time. The tracks are still there. And then he buried his face in his hands and fell silent. Aileen Chen held the envelope between her palms, her thumbs feeling along the edges. It was brown, old, slightly damp. The ink on its surface smeared into a single date, 07-15-85, the night Rebecca Hartwell disappeared. In the room, Matthew Rivers still sat slumped, his breathing uneven. Chen gave him one last glance and opened the envelope. Inside were 4 pages. The first looked like a typewritten statement. The others were handwritten notes and a Polaroid. In the photo, the same faces. Slade, Cormac, Rivers, and in the centre, Rebecca Hartwell. But this time, her face was full of fear. Behind her, the train tracks stretched into the dark. At her feet, shovels and rusty chains. Chen held the Polaroid up to the light, turned it over. On the back was a single line. We dug. She stayed quiet. Her throat tightened. She began reading the statement. We, officers of the Tucson Police Department, brought Rebecca Hartwell to the old depot by the tracks for questioning at 23:45 on the night of July 15th. Vincent Cormac led the interrogation. Henry Slade and I, Monsieur Rivers, stood guard. As she talked, the tension rose. Eventually, we tied her up. And the sentence trailed off. The next words were scrawled in handwriting. And Vincent told us to put her under the tracks. Chen raised her head, whispering, You buried her alive. Rivers didn't answer. He just looked away. But his lips moved faintly. We had no choice. Chen took a deep breath and stuffed the papers into her bag. As she left the room, She paused at the door. "Is it over?" she asked. Without lifting his head, Rivers murmured, "It's never over." Chen closed the door behind her. The uneasy silence in Rivers's room seemed to fill the whole motel. Driving back to Tucson, a plan was already forming in her head. She would confront Cormac with the documents and the photo, corner him, tear apart the web that killed Slade and Hartwell. But as she crossed into the city limits, her phone buzzed with a message. No sender. Just, "Look at your window." Chen slammed her car to the curb and ran to her apartment. On the sill of her window sat a box. On top of it, again, "Don't dig under the tracks, or you'll end up beneath them." Chen opened the box. Inside, a tiny bloodstained shovel model and a small voice recorder. She pressed play. Cormac's voice, familiar, cold. "You've gone too far, Aileen. We're watching you." Then a soft chuckle. That night, Chen didn't sleep. She spread out the files in front of her, scribbling notes, trying to understand why Cormac was still free, and why everyone else stayed silent. All the clues led back to the tracks. But this time, she knew she'd have to dig deeper. At dawn, she called an old medical technician, John Calder, for autopsy records. He'd retired years ago, but clearly hadn't forgotten everything. Chen found him on his porch in a small town, sipping coffee, his dog at his feet. When she introduced herself, Calder sighed. "I knew someone would come," he said. Chen handed him the files. "You saw this body?" Calder looked at the photo of Rebecca's bones. "Yes. Even when we pulled her out from under the tracks, she still seemed to be saying something. She had no lips, but she had a look." Chen flinched. "What do you mean?" Calder squinted. "Some dead whisper from their graves. I just chose not to hear." Chen lowered her head and took the photo back. "And Cormac?" Calder gave a bitter smile. "He was always the brightest player. He managed to silence all of us. But everyone makes a mistake." Chen asked carefully, "What was his mistake?" Calder thought, then pointed to the tracks. "He didn't just bury a body under there. Some memories you can't bury." Driving back, Chen's phone buzzed again, this time with an address. 255W, Alameda Street. Come alone. Chen felt her Glock and found the address on her map. An old factory building, broken windows, wind whistling through it. A perfect trap, but she couldn't turn back. Inside, the air smelled of oil and rust. Somewhere on the floorboards came a faint creak. Silhouettes shifted in the shadows. A voice echoed, "Welcome, Chen." Her finger tightened on the trigger. "Cormac, show yourself." A silhouette stepped forward, cigarette glowing faintly. Cormac. Still in a crisp suit, but his face looked harder than before. "Put it all down and walk away," he said, his voice cold. "This doesn't end." Chen pulled the Polaroid from her pocket and flung it at him. "Look at Rebecca's face. Can you still keep quiet?" Cormac glanced at it, then crumpled it in his fist. "Rebecca was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and now you are too." Chen didn't tell him about the recording device already rolling in her pocket. 2 more men stepped out of the shadows, holding shovels. Chen backed up a step but raised her Glock. "Stay back," she hissed. Cormac smirked. "This is the road to your grave, Chen. Don't make us dig it." Chen's eyes narrowed. "It's not my grave," she said. "I came to dig yours." Just then, the factory doors groaned open. Siren wails pierced the air. A spotlight swept the room, cutting through the darkness. For the first time, the ease on Cormac's face cracked. His men hesitated. Chen pulled out her phone, showing the red recording light. "I streamed it all live," she said. "You can't silence me now." Cormac spat at the floor and took a step toward her. But more shouts came from outside. Footsteps, commands. Police flooded through the doors. Chen lowered her Glock but never took her eyes off him. Even as they cuffed him, Cormac leaned close and hissed, "The tracks are still there. You don't want to end up under them." Chen raised her chin. "I like to dig," she said, "and I'm going deeper." Cormac laughed as they dragged him away, his voice echoing off the factory walls. The deeper you go, the darker it gets. Outside, Chen took a long breath. But peace didn't come, because in his words was more than just a threat. The darkness under the tracks was far from over. As the sky darkened completely, Chen pulled the last page from the envelope from her pocket. River's shaky handwriting read, "If you think it's over, you're wrong. We were only at the door. Behind the door. It's deeper." Chen narrowed her eyes and whispered to herself, "Fine, I'll open the door." That night, the Tucson sky was stubbornly dark. Even the city lights weren't strong enough to cut through it. When Eileen Chen returned to her motel room, the unease inside her had only grown. Cormac had been arrested. Yes. But his look, that last laugh, it was as if he still knew something. As if there was still a piece of the puzzle she couldn't touch. Chen switched on the desk lamp and scanned every corner of the room. She spread the papers from the envelope out again. The Polaroid, the confession notes, the last page in Rivers's handwriting. We were only at the door. Beyond the door, it's deeper. It echoed in her mind. What did it mean? What was beyond the door? How much deeper? Just then, her phone buzzed in her pocket. Blocked number. Chen hesitated, then answered. "Chen," a cold male voice said. "Did you think it was over?" Chen gripped the phone tighter. "Cormac's in custody. It's over." A low laugh from the other end. Cormac was never alone. He was never the door. Chen's throat went dry. "Who are you?" "We," the voice said, "have always been here, and we've been waiting for you." Then a whispered address. "Dry Creek, the old water tower. Come now. Alone." The line went dead. Chen packed her Glock, the Polaroid and the recorder into her bag. She paused for a moment as she slid behind the wheel, then started the engine. The radio crackled to life. An old blues tune played. The air grew colder as she drove. Everything seemed to lead back to the tracks. At Dry Creek, the water tower stood like a skeleton in the moonlight. Rusted iron bones, covered in graffiti. Her footsteps crunched over gravel as she approached. Above, the wind howled, but she could also hear something else, a faint moan. Chen pulled out her flashlight and swept it across the base. There, a hatch stood open. From within came the smell of damp earth. On the hatch, sprayed in black paint, was a single word, well. Chen crouched and pulled the hatch wider. A rusted ladder led down. Each step creaked, the darkness deepening with every descent. The first few rungs groaned under her weight. Then her boots touched soil. Before her stretched a narrow, low tunnel. Words were carved into the walls. She held the light to one. "Stay silent." Another. "You didn't see us." Her skin prickled, but she kept walking. After a while, the tunnel widened. At the center stood a stone platform, and at its heart, a deep pit. From the pit rose an icy draft, and sitting at the edge of it was a figure. Hood up, hands on knees, Chen raised her gun. "Who's there?" she called. The man lifted his head. His face was hidden in shadow, but she knew the voice. Henry Slade, the long-lost, presumed dead Slade. He was alive. In a hoarse whisper he spoke. "I knew you'd find me." Chen narrowed her eyes. "You're behind all of this? Rebecca's body? Cormac?" Slade gave a bitter smile. We were only soldiers. The orders came from here." He pointed to the pit. Chen stepped closer, but the bottom was black, unfathomable. A sound rose from it. Whispers or wind. It was impossible to tell. Chen turned back to him. "What is this? What's down there?" Slade closed his eyes. "Here lie answers, but answers kill questions." Chen snapped, raising her gun. "Speak! What did you do to her?" Slowly, Slade rose to his feet. "We dug. And we found something. At that moment, a sound rose from the pit. A woman's voice. Broken, thin, almost a scream. Aileen! Chen recoiled. Slade chuckled. Now you're beyond the door. Chen's mind reeled. The pit had spoken to her by name. She didn't even let herself wonder how. Slade pulled an old cassette from his pocket. This, he said, her final testimony, Rebecca's last words. Chen took it and slipped it into her coat. But then, heavy footsteps echoed from the far end of the tunnel. Chen raised her gun. Out of the shadows came 3 men, faces covered, shovels in their hands. One of them barked. You shouldn't be here. Chen gritted her teeth. This will be your grave. Slade let out a low laugh. No, he said. This is everyone's grave. The men lunged. Chen fired. The gunshot cracked through the tunnel. One fell. The others retreated. But from the pit came that voice again. Aileen. Deeper. Chen froze as if an icy hand reached from the pit, pulling at her. Slade shouted, Let her go! It wants her! Chen lunged at him, pinning him to the ground. What does that mean? Who wants me? Even in pain, Slade smiled. Rebecca. Chen's heart thundered in her chest. The pit whispered still. Female voices, guttural screams. Slade slipped a small key into her palm. Go to the vault under the tracks, he murmured. Everything is there. Then, before she could stop him, he threw himself into the pit. Chen shouted, but he was already gone, swallowed by darkness. Left alone, Chen clenched the key and ran toward the exit. Her steps quickened, panicked. She climbed the ladder. The night outside was colder, the wind whispering secrets. In the car, she checked her phone. A new message. Hand over the key, or it will find you too. Chen inhaled deeply, started the engine, and drove to the tracks. Dawn was breaking as she arrived. A thin mist hung in the air. Not even the birds dared to sing. She knelt in the center of the tracks. There, beneath an iron plate, was a small lock. She inserted the key and turned it. The plate groaned open. Below it, a narrow metal vault. Chen lifted the lid slowly. Inside were old tapes, a blood-stained notebook, and another photograph. But this time, it wasn't Rebecca. It was Chen, her own face, frightened, tears streaming. The date, 07/16/25. Today. Chen's hands shook. Behind her, a shadow loomed. Footsteps echoed on the rails. Without turning, she whispered, You... A voice answered, You chose this, Aileen. Chen turned to see the man, but his face was unfamiliar, eyes empty, and in his hands, a bloody shovel. When the shovel struck the ground, the clang rang out across the rails. He lowered his head, speaking in a low voice. Are you ready to go deeper? Chen narrowed her eyes and answered, Always. The sunrise over Dry Creek might have looked like a faint hope to others, but to Aileen Chen, it was nothing but a lie. Kneeling by the tracks, she studied the photograph in her hands. Her insides shattered beyond recognition. It was her own face staring back, weeping, terrified, trapped. And the date, today. The man was still there, in the shadows, holding a shovel, his face hidden from the moonlight. Chen finally dared to look him in the eyes, but she didn't recognize him. He said nothing. He only bowed his head slowly, laid the shovel down, and disappeared into the darkness. Chen noticed then a thin slip of paper wrapped around the shovel's handle. She unrolled it and read the black ink. Play the tape. You'll hear everything. Then choose. Chen clutched the cassette tight, climbed into her car, and turned the key. The engine stuttered to life, tired and worn, just like her. On the road, she tried to collect her thoughts. Everything had grown darker, deeper. Cormac was arrested. Slade had thrown himself into the pit. But nothing was finished. In fact, it felt like it was only just beginning. The door beyond. It had opened now. She pulled into an abandoned car wash outside the city, a place she'd once used to meet informants. She parked in the darkest corner and sat with the cassette in her lap. She stared at it as though the voices inside might attack her. But she had to know. She slid it into the tape deck, the reel's word, crackling, then the voice, Rebecca Rivers' voice. If you're hearing this, it's already too late. I saw them, Aileen. I saw how they dug. I saw what came out of the pit. They had no faces, but they had eyes. You can't stop them, no matter what you do. Run from the pit, because it watches you. It's always watched you. Chen's hands began to shake. In the static, she heard Rebecca's breath. Quick, panicked, afraid. Then another voice, low, guttural. You chose this, Rebecca. Now it's her turn. The tape cut out. Chen slammed the deck shut. The cassette popped out and fell onto the seat. She buried her head in her hands. This wasn't just a murder case anymore. It was the unsealing of something that had lain untouched for years, and now that she was inside, there was no way back. Her phone rang. No number on the screen. She answered. Whispers on the line. Words she didn't understand. Then a familiar voice. Slade. Did you listen to the tape? Chen shouted. What did you do to her? What happened to Rebecca? Slade's voice smiled through the line. She went down. We all did. But she couldn't come back. Now it's your turn, Aileen. The vault is waiting. Chen slammed the phone shut, grabbed the tape from the seat. There it was. Another note on it. The vault beneath the tracks. She took a long breath and started the engine. The only way left was down. And she knew it would pull her deeper. When she returned to the tracks, the sky was brightening, but the cold hadn't left. She knelt, lifted the iron plate. The lock was already open. She pulled out the vault, cold, heavy, grey. When she opened the lid, her eyes widened. Inside were three things: a thin envelope marked fog, a small red notebook marked choice, and another photograph, this time more horrifying. Her eyes blindfolded, hands cuffed behind her back, kneeling at the edge of the pit. And behind her, a faceless man. Chen swallowed the knot in her throat. She opened the envelope. Inside, a yellowed letter. The choice is yours. Close the lid, forget, move on, or open it, learn, descend. But if you go down, you won't come back. Chen reached for the notebook. Inside, a single line. We are waiting for you below. She leaned her head back. The wind cut across her face, but the storm inside her was worse. She gathered the contents of the vault into her bag, then looked up at the sky and whispered, Fine, I'm coming. She walked back to her car, but she wasn't alone. In the back seat, a pair of eyes stared at her. Chen spun around. In the shadows sat a figure, its face blank, silent. From its mouth came one word, now. Before it could move, Chen flung the door open, stumbled out, and fell to her knees in the road. The car's windows fogged from the inside, still watching her. Then her phone buzzed. A new message. Ready for the meeting? Below it, a location. Verona Cemetery. Midnight. Chen slipped the phone into her pocket. Her eyes steeled, her hands cold. She glanced once more at the pit behind her and muttered, Yes, I'm ready. That evening, she arrived at Verona Cemetery. Everything was silent. The gate stood open. A thin mist drifted between white marble stones. The shadows seemed to lean toward her. She walked toward the old chapel at the centre. Its door hung ajar. Inside, stacked wooden coffins lined the walls. In the centre, a table. On it, a cassette player. Beside it, a note. Play it and go down. Chen placed the tape in the player. At first, a solemn hymn played, but after a few seconds it warped and whispers took over. When you descend, close your eyes. Follow the voices. The voices will find you. As the tape ended, a stone slab beside the table slid open. Below it, another dark staircase. Chen descended. This time she didn't count the steps. It was as if she'd already left everything behind, determined to reach the deepest place. At the bottom was a vast hall. Old photographs lined the walls, each one showing different people captured as they entered the pit. At the very end, she saw her own picture, holding a shovel, eyes closed, dated today. Then she saw them, a group of silent figures seated in the hall. No masks, but no faces either. They stared at her. One of them reached out a hand. Chen took it. The hand was ice cold. The figure spoke. "You've made your choice. There is no way back." Chen stepped forward. As the stone door sealed behind her, she looked up one last time, then closed her eyes and let herself dissolve into the darkness. Darkness. Everything around Aileen Chen was darkness. But this time, it wasn't an ordinary darkness. It was something tangible, cold, sticky. It seeped into her lungs with every breath, echoing inside her, refusing to leave. As she moved, gravel crunched underfoot, and she could swear she heard others walking with her, their steps faint, out of sync with her own. When she opened her eyes, she couldn't even say what she saw, because there was no light, and yet, someone was there, breathing, so close, too close. Chen reached out and found a wall, pressing her fingers against cold, wet stone, like the inside of a cave. She leaned on it and took another step. Everything she had left behind, the tape's hiss, the creak of the stairs, the wind above ground, had fallen utterly silent. Only their breath remained. Then, a faint light appeared in the blackness, weak, flickering like a single candle. Chen moved toward it. With each step, she felt the stone beneath her slope downward, a tunnel. On the walls, old photographs hung in decaying frames, each covered in a thin layer of mildew. One showed Rebecca Rivers, caught mid-scream, eyes wide with terror. Below it, typed in faded letters, Rebecca Rivers. She saw them. Chen swallowed hard and moved to the next frame. It was herself, but impossible. Her face wore an expression she'd never seen. Eyes shut, a strange, uncertain smile on her lips. Beneath it, Aileen Chen. She joined them. Chen recoiled. The photographs began to quiver. One by one, the people in them opened their eyes and stared back at her. And in that instant she understood. These photos were not dead. She pressed on toward the light and saw an ancient door. Carved into its surface were the words, "Only those who open their eyes may pass." Chen drew a deep breath, placed her hands on the door, and pushed. It groaned open, and at first there was only silence, then cold, then voices. A small chamber lay beyond. In its center, a round wooden table surrounded by aged chairs. On each chair sat a figure, faceless, but each wearing a mask studded with eyes. When she entered, all their heads turned toward her. One opened a book and spoke. "Aileen Chen, January 29th. You've come today. Are your eyes open?" Chen bowed her head. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. Another, in a voice neither male nor female, replied, "Look at us." Against her will, Chen lifted her gaze and met the mask's eyes. Suddenly her mind filled with a horrifying vision. A pit, deep and black. At its bottom, a city, bathed in red neon lights, silent but alive. Things, human or almost human, wandered its streets, but they had no faces, only eyes. Chen stumbled back. Why am I here? She shouted. One figure slowly rose. Because you chose, because you listened, because you descended. Chen backed against the wall. I want to leave. All at once, the faceless figures spoke in unison. There is no exit. The table slid aside to reveal a dark opening in the floor, another stairway, leading even deeper. Chen's legs trembled, but she couldn't tear her eyes away, because the pit was staring back at her. Then the lights went out. Silence swallowed the room. Chen thought she was alone, until a whisper came. Go down, you'll see. Chen bit her lip, drew a breath, and stepped to the stairs. The first stone step was so cold it burned her foot, but she kept going. The stairs seemed endless. On each step, eyes opened on the walls, fixing their gaze on her, and with every step, she felt something of herself being taken. Finally, she reached the bottom, a vast chamber. In the center stood a basin of red stone, and it was filled with blood. Floating on the surface were hundreds of photographs, each one an echo of someone who had come from the pit. Chen knelt, dipped her hand in. The liquid was icy and glowed red at her touch. A photo stuck to her palm. She lifted it. It showed herself, but this time at the bottom of the pit, eyes blindfolded, mouth sewn shut, surrounded by kneeling figures. She stumbled back, too late. At the edge of the basin, a figure emerged. Slade, but his face was unrecognizable. A dark mask covered in eyes. He walked toward her. You came to join us. You made your choice. Your eyes are open. Now it's your turn. Chen shook her head violently. No, I didn't want this. I didn't. Slade reached out, grasped her arm. The chamber flared crimson, and all the eyes on the walls blinked as a low hum filled the air. Chen's mind blurred. The line between real and unreal disappeared. The pool rose into a vortex, swallowing the photographs. Slade leaned close to her ear. The pit has been waiting for you. It always has. Chen screamed and was pulled into the basin. When she opened her eyes again, she was back in the darkness, but something had changed. She looked at her hands, and they were covered in eyes. On each finger, on her palms, new, unblinking gazes stared back at her. A whisper rose. You are one of us now. Chen stumbled to the wall, muttering, No. But the voices would not stop. Faces began to emerge from the stone, each one her own. Lost, terrified, alive. They spoke as one. We are you now. Chen fell to her knees. She covered her face, but the eyes on her hands stayed open. She screamed, but it was no longer her voice. It was the echo of thousands. Suddenly, a shaft of light cut through the darkness, and in its beam, a single envelope descended. Chen reached out, tore it open with trembling fingers. Inside was one word: end. She looked up, her face flushed with blood, and she understood. The pit had no end, because the pit was her. The chamber plunged into blackness. The last thing she saw was the writing on the wall: Welcome. At dawn, Chen pulled her car to the edge of the desert. When the engine's growl faded, only the wind's whisper as it played with the sand remained. She checked her phone. A message had arrived. If you want to see the end, come to the mine. Come alone. There was no name, but Chen already knew. This time she wouldn't run. She had uncovered an entire network, had dozens of people arrested, was about to close Rebecca's file, but something was still missing. The place where the conflict had begun. Something kept calling her back to that mine. She got out of the car, checked the gun at her waist. In her pocket, a flashlight and gloves. The air was still chilly. The sun hadn't yet risen. Up ahead, The abandoned mine shaft stood in the middle of the desert like a dark wound. Chen walked toward it slowly, as if approaching a grave. As she drew closer, the ground beneath her feet hardened, broken stones and rusty metal pieces crunching underfoot. At the entrance stood a rusty door, a large X spray-painted across it, but the ground bore fresh footprints. Chen took a deep breath and went inside. The mine was bigger than it looked. The iron beams of the ceiling were broken, some places had collapsed, and only a thin line of light seeped through. Chen switched on her flashlight. The thin beam cut through the dust, revealing old equipment, broken boards, and crumbling walls. A metallic sound echoed like a scream. She spun around, shining her light. Nothing. And then she saw a shadow, a figure slowly walking toward her from the darkness. "You finally found me," said a familiar voice. Chen raised the light. Standing before her was David Hartwell. "David, you were here." "I'm here, yes. I've always been here." David's face was pale, as if it hadn't seen the sun. His eyes were vacant, his hands in his pockets. "What are you doing here? Everyone thinks you're safe." "Am I safe, Chen? Rebecca was safe, wasn't she? And what happened?" Chen stepped back. "David, I promise you, they'll be tried. Cormier Stone, they'll all pay." "You think it's just them?" David said in a hoarse voice. Then he gestured toward the depths of the mine. Chen shone her light in that direction. Against the wall was a table. On it, piles of files, tapes, an old camera, and a burlap sack. Chen slowly approached. The sack was open. A dusty Arizona State Police hat hung out of it. Next to it, a rusted badge and a letter. Chen put on her gloves and opened the letter. "Chen, if you're reading this, you've completed the story. But every story has a price. This isn't just Rebecca's story. This is all of ours. And this pit isn't just her grave. It's all of ours. I was the last witness. I brought them here, gathered the evidence. Now it's my turn. No one must remain. David." Chen's heart pounded. When she looked up, David was still there, but now he was holding a gun. "When Rebecca died," David said, his voice cracking, "I lived. For 15 years, I died every night, over and over. I had to stop it. I brought them all here, Chen. They're all here." Chen's light slowly drifted down toward the dark pit behind David, and there, inside the pit, she saw bones piled on top of each other, uniforms, badges. "What have you done?" Chen whispered. "I brought justice. They deserved it. This was their trial. For Rebecca." David slowly walked toward the pit. Chen wanted to move, but it was as if her feet were nailed to the ground. "David, stop. This isn't the way. It's over now. It never ends, Chen. It has to end here." And then, in an instant, he pressed the gun to his temple. Chen cried out, "No!" But it was too late. The gunshot echoed off the mine's ceiling. David's body slowly toppled into the pit. Hours later, the mine was cordoned off with the yellow tape. FBI agents, forensic teams, everyone was there. Chen sat outside on a rock, wrapped in a blanket. Her hands still trembled. They were cataloguing what they pulled from the pit. Cormier's missing accountant, a federal agent who had suddenly died during a corruption investigation, a former prosecutor declared missing years ago, and the skeletal hand clutching Rebecca's badge. Everything was there. David had hunted them down one by one, avenged Rebecca, held his own court. Chen turned to an official. "Are they all here?" The man nodded. "All of them." Chen took a deep breath. Finally, it was over. Months later, Rebecca Hartwell and the other victims were buried with honors. Under the Arizona sun, the crowd gathered before the flag-draped coffins, silently praying. Chen stood in front of Rebecca's headstone. It read, "She died for justice. She stood against silence. Next to it was David's small, simple stone. It simply read, "Brother." Chen pulled a small notebook from her pocket, Rebecca's old notebook from years ago. As she flipped to the last page, she noticed a sentence scribbled in the margin. "The truth, no matter how deep it's buried, will always come out." Chen looked up, gazing at the desert horizon. Night had fallen, and the stars were winking above. The mine had long since been sealed shut, the entrance completely closed. A single sign stood there now, Rebecca Hartwell and the Martyrs of Justice Memorial. Chen slowly turned, leaving footprints in the sand as she whispered to herself, "It's over, Rebecca. Rest now." She got in her car, started the engine, and took one last look at the darkness where the mine had been. Then she drove away. Behind her, the pit swallowed the darkness of years, and at last, justice had been served.